Good evening. I'm Susan Craighead, President of the League of Women Voters of Naperville. Regardless of your political leanings or response to our recent election, you may be struggling personally with the current political climate and vitriol. Are you able to have the civil conversation with family and friends that you would like? Have long-standing ties been weakened over differences? Family therapist Christina Maki will discuss how to manage some of these struggles. Maki is a licensed marriage and family therapist with over a decade of experience. Her primary aim is to build resilience, find internal strengths, and create healthy relationships. Christina's style of therapy is relational, strength-based, evidence-based, and integrative. Christina, I'd like to hand it over to you, and if you'd like to do any more introduction of yourself, we'd be happy to hear that.
Well, hi, thank you so much for having me. I am Christina. I am a marriage and family therapist, and my primary passion, like you noted, is really about relationship. It's why I chose marriage and family therapy as a profession under the mental health umbrella. I find that relationship is such, whether it's with ourselves, whether it's with others, whether it's with our community, it's uh, it's the cornerstone to health is learning how to have healthy relationships. So I'm excited to be here and talk about this topic because we are seeing a huge increase in mental health struggles as clinicians, as researchers, because of the election, because of the political vitriol, our conflicts with our families and friends, because it seems like we can't communicate or be seen around political discussions anymore. So I'm glad to be able to be here, share some of my thoughts, some of my knowledge, and answer questions as they come up. So if there are any specific questions that you're hoping to get out of today, please write it in the chat. I know Susan will read them to me as appropriate as they fit in with what we're talking about. This is a topic I could go on for hours, so I can adjust as needed based on some of the questions as well. So where I want to approach this topic is twofold. The first is I'm going to be looking at the relationship with ourselves because our emotions are a big part of ourself. And then I'll be looking at the relationship with others because again, that's where we're seeing a lot of the effect is the crumbling relationships. Um, that's all around us, everywhere we look. We're hearing stories. I'm seeing it very clearly in my office. They did a recent study of clinicians, and 87% of therapists are saying politics is a normal part of their discussions in the therapy room because it is affecting their mental health and their personal lives. Um, so that's where I'm going to go from today is from those two aspects. Um, when we look at the research that's coming out, it is newer because the climate has changed. It is different in the sense that it is much more present. It's only within the last decade or so that we have 24-hour news cycles, social media that really put politics into the forefront, into our daily conversations. And so research that coming up is newer, but all of the evidence is showing that where our politics now, it is having a negative effect on a broad range of health outcomes. Some people are even starting to call this an election stress disorder. It's not in our DSM, which is how we diagnose, but the possibility of it going in there and future additions is high because the research is coming out quick and it is clear, the evidence is clear that harm that it is causing at that individual level. People are talking about how politics is directly correlated to increased heart rate. inability to turn off intrusive thoughts about politics, stomach aches, headaches, using substances to cope, which leads to addiction, anger and irritation, which I'm sure no one is surprised about, problem sleeping. Some of the more worrying ones are feelings of hopelessness. Several surveys are finding about 1 in 20 people have had suicidal thoughts because of the political environment, which is terrifying to think about, that it has an effect all the way up to people contemplating harming themselves. And from a relational perspective is the compassion fatigue. And we're really having a hard time feeling a sense of compassion, feeling a sense of empathy, which is a cornerstone to health and especially healthy relationship. When we look at a lot of these symptoms, it is not surprising that we recognize now that this is falling under the umbrella of chronic stress. And who hasn't gone to the doctor and the doctor say, hey, are you stressed out? Do you need to take care of your stress, lower your stress levels? This is really playing another role in that, because it is stressing us out, and it is chronic because we have access to political everything on a daily basis at any time of day, um, whether we're talking about it on social media, whether we're watching it on news, it is there. And with chronic stress, it can create new problems, heart problems, physical problems, or exacerbate existing issues, including exacerbating anxiety and depressive disorders. One of the reasons for this is where I get a little technical. I won't go super sciencey, I promise. But our brain craves negativity. Our brain craves negativity. It is a survival mechanism. It craves negativity because if we feel things in a big way, we have a better ability to protect ourselves. And from if we're looking at evolutionary psychology, it's because we needed that to survive thousands of years ago. In 2025, not everything is about survival. So it's not a mechanism that we need anymore, but we're driven to do that. So when we are exposed to news cycles full of conflict, vitriol, dehumanizing language, a general us against them mentality, it really feeds into some of those primal urges that our brain is looking for. And then we are always in a constant state of survival, and it's very hard, it can be very hard to come out of. On top of that, there is this other, when we look at stress and anxiety and anger, there is this concept of the survival of the busiest thought. Our brain will focus on the busiest things in our life. And hopefully, the busiest thought is something joyous, like our kid doing really well when in their sports activity, or seeing or talking to Susan about her grandson having a first Christmas in a new house. And we want those happy images to be our busy thought and ever present. But the way the current environment is set up, the negativity is pushed so that the focus is on it. And it really is detrimental to us to having a contented, not necessarily happy, but a contented way of life. There is one benefit. I want to point this out. There is one benefit to the current political climate, which is it is pushing a lot of people to become more politically active. And there is a much more active engagement in our democratic process, which is a beautiful thing. But we have to figure out a balance of well-being and action, because if we can find that well-being, we'll be and choose to be politically active instead of going from a place of anger or fear or whatever large emotion is driving us. I think we'll see a healthier society and healthier discourse. Um, some of the best ways to look at that individual um, emotional impact is, what do you need to do to fight stress? Always going back to basics is a good thing. What do you need to do to have an active lifestyle? Whether it's exercise, going for walks, dancing it out, singing it out, whatever brings you joy. Are you taking care of your body, nourishing your body with good foods? Are you having a good sleep hygiene routine, making sure that you're giving your body and brain time to rest so that when you wake up, you feel refreshed, ready to choose the positive things in your life instead of some of the negative discourse that is going to bombard you, especially if you're one to wake up and open up your social media right away and see some of that negative thought. Some other good things that we can do for ourselves at the individual level is reading about news in like a newspaper or an article over watching. There's a lot of good research out there that you are have much more ability to um, critique what you're reading over than pure belief of the bombardment from the sensory experience of watching or listening. So even at that level, it's great. Also, putting down your social media, making sure that it's not something that you're looking at constantly, because if you're engaging, again, it's that survival of that busiest thought, survival of what's right in front of you. If it is constantly negative, that is that place you're going to be. And if you become much more fully in your stress, and it's not good on so many levels. So as at that individual level, we have to begin to care for ourselves, as the chronic stress we are seeing from the current heated political world, it's taxing our physical, our emotional and social resources, reducing our resilience and lowering our ability to engage in empathy and compassion. And so whatever we need to do to grow those areas, we're going to have um, better ability to lead a healthier, more fulfilling life. And at an individual level, that's going to help us with our relationships. So as we move into, and I should ask if there's any questions about that individual level, that kind of chronic stress we're going to, please, this is a good time to ask. Otherwise, I'm going to move into the more relational with other people aspect. Okay, so now we'll move into more of that relationship with others, because I think this is where a lot of hurt comes from. It's not necessarily, I mean, the hurt to ourselves we understand, but a lot of us live with chronic stress and we find ways to maintain, but we become hurt and become lonely when it feels like we're isolated from our friends and families, um, or we see it in our families, see it happening, and we feel helpless and we don't understand what to do, what we can do. At basic, the first thing to look at too is, how is our stress affecting us? Because if we're stressed out, it's bad for our relationships. We become much more reactive and less likely to respond to what's happening around us. I mean, just think about coming home when you're stressed out and the kids do something as simple as knock over a cup of water, and suddenly we're yelling and we're angry because we don't have the patience to respond in a kind way. Or maybe we're stressed out and we're coming home to our partner or our parents and somehow they breathe incorrectly and it just annoys us when normally it wouldn't. And again, then we make a snippety comment, and that hurts our relationship. So again, that individual, just the chronic stress can already just at that level hurt our relationship. On a little bit more abstract level, It's hard when you're reading research articles of saying why is this affecting our relationship, and there's no explanation. This is where I go and look at my clients and see what's happening. And the majority of time, surprisingly, it's not about the politics, but the politics are the things that we point to. When we look at relationship, if we scale an emotional response from 1 to 10, if an emotional response is something bigger than a 5, it is rarely about the thing in front of us. And politics, it ends up being an emotional level of a 9 or a 10. We know pretty quickly it's not about the politics. And that might sound weird, but it's because we go to this place of we have a lot of relational hurt in our lives. We have a lot of hurts from our families, from our childhood that rarely get addressed because we don't have the words for us. So many of us grew up not feeling safe, not feeling loved, not feeling like there was trust, not feeling like the adults in our lives took any accountability that their actions hurt us. For women, and I know this is mostly female environment, 1 in 3 women have relational trauma, specifically sexual abuse or sexual assault, and it makes it harder to feel safe in relationship. We put our guard up, go back to the brain is trying to take care of us to keep us safe, and so it puts this guard up. But what's hard then with when we add in politics, and especially right now, politics is especially party politics, it gives us a false sense of belonging and identity. They do a beautiful job giving us clear verbiage, wonderful talking points, an identity, a clear enemy, an us versus them mentality that helps us express the hurt that we were already feeling. And when it comes to families, this becomes an easy place to point the finger and says, well, I can talk about this hurt because we're getting permission to do so. In 10, 15, 20 years ago, there was the unwritten rule that we don't talk about sex, politics, and money, right? That's the thing that we don't talk about. And on top of it is that we always go back to our families. We trust our families, we engage with our families no matter what. That was the unwritten rules that we all lived in, that we were all asked to live in. And so we stuffed down all of these feelings that have been inside us for so long. And now, with the rise of social media, the rise of this really divided political system, we are getting a cultural acceptance that says you can talk about your hurt, you can talk about your pain now, and here is what it's going to look like. And so it's giving us the fuel to allow that anger and pain and hurt to come up and create bigger divide. Now that's again, it's not 100%, but the majority of times, this is what I'm seeing when I bring families in and say the politics are breaking us apart. And it is on the outside, but really it's bringing up those bigger pains that we just never had the words for or the permission to talk about. With our friendships, there is some similarity in that I think we believe a lot of our friendships are more deep and meaningful. But when we talk about our friendships, and I know with a lot of clients that I see, when we really look into it, we say, well, why why haven't you talked about these things in the past? And there is a piece where we protected our friends by not talking about the things. We didn't want to burden them with the hurts that we have because we love our friends. We do. And we don't want to bother them. We want to save them. Or we were in situations that we just assumed that we had the same feelings, same thoughts. And so when something like politics comes up and we believe in different things, we feel shock and we feel hurt and we feel betrayed, and all those little things that we had done in the past to protect, we don't feel great about anymore. And those are creating such big divides. And so trying to figure out, where do we move forward with friendships? Can I be friends with someone who doesn't have the same belief system as me? The answer is yes. And we have to look at, maybe, what are some of the other unspoken things that maybe we need to have a discussion about what's keeping our friendship from being truly intimate. Having that emotional intimacy with our friends is very important. They become our support system. So when we look at families who haven't been affected as much as others, we look at what is working for them. And from a therapy standpoint, it's attachment literature. You don't have to know what attachment literature is, but it's this concept of, we have the secure attachment. And in secure attachment, we have the ability to have a freedom of thought, of an ability to go out and explore conversations that are not based in judgment and shame. And when there is a long history of conversation without judgment and shame, and an ability to connect and accept anyone for who they are, what they believe, where they're coming from their history, love, compassion, and empathy is developed over shame, guilt, judgment, hurt, punishment, all of those things. So as you look at your relationship, to really ask yourself, what am I doing to build empathy and compassion? It starts to change how you have conversations with them. So, two really big points that I want people to take away from today is, and asking themselves, or asking themselves about their own journey, if this is a problem for you, or even just beginning to explore from an empathetic, compassionate way, is, when you see large political stress, why are they really protecting? What are they protecting by holding on to that political stress? Is there a deeper conversation that actually needs to be had, that hurt, that healing that needs to be had? Maybe it is as simple as stress and overwhelm, not just about politics, but daily life is so overwhelming that the political stress is now that proverbial needle on the haystack that is just making everything tumble. And I think I used that metaphor wrong, so I apologize. Um, but what is it that they might need? More support, more kindness, so they have the ability to take care of their stress. But again, that question of, what are they really protecting by holding on to their political stress, becomes a really important question for healing and for starting a more compassionate, empathetic conversation. And I think now the second question too that I want people to really think about is, going forward, is how do we drive political engagement and political activism where it feels like a choice over an emotional response? Because right now the emotions are driving everything, and that emotional reaction is definitely not a response or a place that's coming from a value system, a place where we can really see where everyone is doing the best that they can. So if there is, and again, this is going to be the continued discourse for a lot of people, and I don't have an answer for this one, but what do we need to do to increase engagement where it's a choice, where we're protecting well-being? And I think that is the second question that I really want people to take away. So like I said, I can go on forever. I wanted to start there because I wanted to answer questions people had. um, uh, yeah, I want to be able to answer any questions people had.
So we have at least one question in the chat right now. Are the people having mental health issues primarily the anti-Trump folks? Let's just put it all out there. Are MAGA people also stressed? Seems like the two groups have similar issues, for example, not getting along with friends and family. However, it seems that the liberals have different issues because of concern for democracy.
Sure. It's a good question. And this is where I go straight to the research, and the research shows that it's very even. The same, because the stress response, the mechanism the same, no matter what the belief system. What is happening in our body is the same. So it is, we are all, it doesn't matter if you're a Democrat, doesn't matter if you're Republican, doesn't matter if Starbucks coffee is your favorite or Dunkin' is your favorite, or I was just in Minnesota and everyone drinks Caribou, which is so strange. That doesn't matter. The stress response is the same, truthfully the same. It might be expressed in different ways. Again, whether it's hopelessness right now or excitement and hate, it is still a large emotion, and a large emotion making any decision is bad. So it is equal amounts on either side of the aisle.
So, if you're trying to communicate with somebody else, how do you assert yourself and yet be respectful at the same time, especially if the other person isn't make appear to doesn't appear to be making the same efforts that you think you're making, right? To
Yeah,
have a calm discussion.
yeah. One of the truths that I live by is empathy without boundaries is not real empathy, and boundaries without empathy is not real boundaries. And so the first thing you really have to, you really building these side by side is, what do you know in terms of boundaries that where you're going to be okay? Because if we're having discussions that are really hurting us, we have to ask ourselves, can we really be in this discussion right now? At the same time, we also have to approach the people around us from a place of compassion and empathy. And again, whenever we have an us versus them, or a winner or loser in a competition, we're already creating a divide and negativity that our brain is going to thrive on. And it's very hard to be empathetic while being negative. So when we're in a conversation, the first thing you can do is to foster empathy and compassion and curiosity for where they're coming from. They may never listen to what you have to say, because like you said, they may not be able to do the work, but you don't have control over their doing the work or if they're going to be empathetic or compassionate. But what I find is, when you have empathy or compassion, and I sit in a room with a lot of people who have different beliefs than me, different backgrounds than me. One of the first places I worked was in a prison with some of the worst offenses, and there was always a place where I could find love and compassion and understanding from why they're coming from where they are and what happened in their life. There's always a place. And when you're able to do that work, when you do have to set a boundary, if you have to set a boundary and say, I don't believe that, or I don't think I can have this conversation with you because I don't know that we're going to meet in the middle, and I respect this relationship enough to turn it into an argument, you're doing that from a place with much more kindness. It's hard to do, but the focus has to be on you and your integrity and what you're able to give, but focus on that compassion, focus on that empathy, the active listening skills. And if the other person feels listened to, they might ask you a question in return and begin to listen to you as well.
Sometimes it feels as if right now that um, some of us get really upset when people disagree with our political views in ways that
Mhm.
we might accept the fact that they disagree with our fashion sense or something else that might also be part of our identity, right? There are many things that are, but sometimes politics feels like a button
Yeah.
that's really pushed. And how can we understand that better?
Yeah, I think first is to go back, it's that understanding of self. And that's why I really want to point out that relationship to ourself. We are who we surround ourselves with, the information that we surround ourselves with, what we engage in is who we are. And politics becomes such a hot button and feels more important than it really is because it's in our face all the time. Versus fashion, we might look at it, right? But we're not necessarily verbalizing it. Versus if you're someone in the fashion industry and you're having a conversation about fashion, and I've worked with people in the fashion industry, they will make it a hot button issue because it is their life. It is their life because that is what they're being surrounded by. And so if it feels like, and I think this is where it's always hard, how much of it is a choice that we are in these political discussion versus how much are we forced into it by a current cultural context. And I think sometimes if we take a step back and think of it from that place, we can really choose, do I want to engage in this all the time? Do I want to be seeing this all the time? Or do I want to be exposing myself to other things, opening myself up to other things so that it doesn't hit as hard? If that does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So, so sometimes people have feelings of helplessness or guilt about not doing enough politically.
Yeah.
I think that can go on both sides of the fence
100%.
as well. Um, what do we do personally with those feelings? I mean, I see a number of league members here tonight. So some
Yeah.
of us have said, get out the vote, or we do volunteer or social service activities. And yet we still feel a little helpless, or should we have done more? How do we manage those internal feelings?
Yeah, that's really hard. And some of it is a self-exploration. Um, there is a piece where there is an infinite amount of things that we can um, engage in. There is so many levels of politics that we can engagements, topics that we can donate to, really invest in, and but we can't do all the things. We have it's like we're a battery, and so we have finite energy that we can pass around, and we cannot give to the point where now we don't have enough to give to other people where they might it is just as important to give it to. So are we being politically active to the point where we're not taking care of nurturing our family relationships, our friendships? Is it affecting our work? If when you look at, I think one of the biggest questions is, I go back to family relationships a lot. I'm very biased about it. But when I ask people, put a number, a percentage on the conversations with family, your immediate family, how much of it is task oriented and how much of it is relationship oriented? How much of it is, have you done the laundry today? Did you put the dishes away? Honey, can you go up and make sure your bed is made? Did you get your homework done? Have you, those questions, I mean, so often they become the primary conversation because all of our relational energy is being pushed aside. We have to take a step back and go, no, no, these relationships, my family, that's where that's where my life really is. As I want to, or my friendships is where I really want to be. We have to have the energy for those things because we will always be guilted again because we're consuming so much and there's so many things we can feel guilty for and want to invest our time in. But it's to the detriment of the other important things in our life. So you have a finite resource of energy. Make sure the majority of it is going to where it really needs to be. Whatever is left over then can go to whatever activism that you would like to do.
So another question in the chat. Can you discuss the tribalism that seems to be developing? I feel like my brother has joined a different tribe, one that wants my tribe to die or something.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the really that hard part, because again, it is tribalism. It feels a little bit like cult politics sometimes. And it truthfully, it is because they're given a place to go and a platform. They know what to say. It is that us against them. We're not going to change it for them, unfortunately. We're not. But if we have empathy for them and start again changing the conversation where the other person feels seen and heard by you, at a minimum they're going to be an exception. They're going to take turn you into an exception. They're going to be like, yeah. I know you're different. The rest of you aren't, but you're different. That's a start, because you've already changed their mind that there might be exceptions to the rules. But that can only come from a place of kindness and compassion. It can be really hard to do, again, when the words that are coming out, the people that are being attacked, are close to your heart or you identify with. But right now, there's such a loneliness. And I will say, especially when we look at white males, privileged white males, they are the loneliest group in America. They are lonely. They aren't given permission to have deep, meaningful friendships, emotional connections. They don't know how, because it's never been role model to them. And it's, again, I'm making sweeping generalizations. It's never 100%. But as a group, we're seeing this deep sense of loneliness and they don't know how to fill it. And so when something attractive and says, hey, you can belong, come here, they will go. Prior to this, there was much more, it used to much more be drugs and alcohol. Truthfully, drugs, alcohol, porn addictions. I know people don't want to hear that, but it's true. That it's always attractive to people. But now there is one that's much more communal, much more relationship based. The other ones aren't relationship based, but politics can be. A lot of them are going there because they are so lonely. They feel so hurt within their families and unseen. So the more you can build a relationship, again, from a place of kindness and trust, they will start coming back. They have the ability to come back if they feel less lonely with you. But the loneliness epidemic is really a big part of this.
So you talked a little bit about social media and
Yeah.
our interest in social media. I will tell you that after the election, I went on about a 2 week break, not necessarily from social media. I mean, from the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Chicago Tribune. I just could not read. I just took a break. And I will tell you, I think it was very healthy. So I'm not so much a social media person as reading too many newspapers on any one given day, but I did need that break. And now I'm sort of back into it and, I'm easing my way into it. But what are your feelings about how people might approach their use of media on their devices?
Yeah, I think one of the things to always remember, and sometimes it's a harsh reality, is everything on the internet is trying to sell you something. So the more sensational, the more you're going to get hooked. And if you're aware that that's how the world works, that the internet works, even friends, it's the likes, it's the clicks, it's hey, I have friends, the understanding, it's a it is still a sell. So if you keep that in the back of your mind, you're much more able to say, how much am I willing to consume today? Because I want to be informed. I want to know what's happening in the world. It's important to know, but I can't live in the sensational. I can't live in the negative because it's too much stress on my system. And if you're feeling any of the symptoms of chronic stress, again, increased heart rate, blood pressure, stomach aches, headaches, increased anger, irritation, problem sleeping, chronic pain, yes, definitely go to the doctor. Got to check biological things. It's also okay to go, is this contributing to my stress? And is it okay that it's contributing to your stress? Because this is something that's in my control, is how much I look at it. So really limiting your time, give yourself to the ability to say, I'm only going to do 15 minutes today. I'm going to set a timer and then I'm going to turn it off and walk away. 15 minutes might not be enough. If it's right now 6, 7 hours, if it's 6, 7 hours, let's go down to like 4. We can start limiting it slowly. But yes, learning, it's that ability to compartmentalize is the wrong word. I'm having a brain fart about the word that I'm looking. I guess manage. We'll go with manage. Manage where you're putting your time and your effort. But if it is in constant sensationalizing, social media, big news articles, you will start feeling all of those emotions, and that's going to hurt us.
So I wonder if anybody here in the audience tonight has any experiences they'd like to share, any challenges they've had or ways they have dealt with relationships, either successfully or unsuccessfully. I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but if anybody would like to share, it might be helpful to other people. Not seeing a lot of volunteers. Sometimes it's just too close to our hearts. Julie?
It is a painful subject because we do have a lot of relational hurts. We have a lot of hurts on this, and it is overwhelming. And it's hard when we're in that overwhelm of any state, individually, relation. It's really hard. If you ever need someone to talk to about it, there's really great clinicians that will help you make sense of and understand it. Sometimes I think there is a little bit of a view still that we go to therapists only when we're in crisis, but sometimes it's this problem solving of understanding, how do I do this in a new way if I'm really struggling with it? And I encourage you to talk to a therapist about it. Again, I'm biased to marriage and family therapists, but there's social workers, psychologists, they all can do the work too, really beautifully.
Were you going to say something, Julie?
Oh, yeah, I was going to volunteer some, I guess, an experience that I've had in the past couple of weeks, because I was in Pennsylvania, in rural Pennsylvania, which is kind of, the heart of conservatism. And, it's a very, I don't want to say closed-minded, but their worldview is kind of narrow compared to people around here. They're just not as exposed to as many things as we are. And I've found that going back there, I still know a ton of people. And I guess just listening seems to be the way to find common ground and to diffuse any tension, because there were times when I was uncomfortable. But when I would just kind of bite my tongue and maybe ask some questions to figure out maybe the reasoning behind their beliefs, I found that we could find kind of a middle ground, and we could both discuss what we were feeling or what we thought about a certain topic, even if it wasn't, blatantly political. There were things that, could be controversial, or maybe our beliefs were very strong one way or another. But it makes you really appreciate listening and just kind of participating in the conversation rather than reacting to the conversation.
Yeah. I think what's beautiful about that is when you're connecting on that emotional level, to be able to say is I'm just afraid. We might be afraid about different things, but I'm just afraid. We all know what that feeling is like, and connecting and saying, yeah, that's not fun. And I think, the comment that just popped up is talking about that, the feeling of unease or feeling of hope. I can't remember exactly what it popped up, but we all know what that feels like. And it's hard. And I think we can connect at a minimum, connect at that level and go, yeah, that's not fun. I don't want to be there either. I don't know that there's a right answer or a way forward, but I know what that's like, and I can really see, I can see that it's affecting you and it's affecting me. And that in and of itself is a beautiful connecting statement, and can say, okay, we're both human. It's okay.
Is
Yeah, and I
anybody
think,
else?
oh, I'm so sorry.
No, go ahead, Julie.
I'm like totally taking over this whole thing. And I think humanizing the other is really important too, because I think it's so easy to just kind of put all of them, them into a category and forget that they're experiencing things too. And maybe the reason that they're having an opinion that is so vastly different than yours is because their situation is so vastly different than yours. And there's not a one size fits all solution to anything.
Yeah.
And I think politics these days is trying to make it seem like there's maybe a one size fits all solution to things. And then when it doesn't work, the people who it doesn't work for are really, really mad.
Yeah.
So, I think there's a lot going on.
It is. Everything is so layered. Nothing is ever either or, us, them. It's all so interrelated and it's all so complex. And even the political trends, like when you look at the research, if you ask someone about what their thoughts are now from a year from now, it can be completely different. And we're not even realizing it, but because we're talking about what is being said right now, because we're getting our talking points clearly and consistently, like we recognize that we're just all human and trying to figure out life. We all are. So being able to recognize that it's complex, to really stay in the gray area. Again, talk about the brain not liking something. The brain hates a gray area. It hates that we can hold multiple emotions at once. It hates that, the dissonance of things. It hates it. It wants you to choose. But the beauty of being a human being, the beauty of developing that part of our brain that can do that, it's exhausting to do, but it's important because we really become much more flexible. We get to see the whole vast spectrum of understanding. And again, go back to combat. I will always come back to compassion and empathy. We just get to be more compassionate and empathetic where anyone is on that spectrum.
Do we have any other comments or questions for this evening? I've actually found this very valuable. I think I'm a firm believer in the gray area, but I also think it has given me permission to do the laundry instead of read the newspaper.
Yeah.
And maybe that is a great thing, that those everyday tasks and those everyday bits of our relationships are maybe part of what we need to nurture rather than some of the stress and excitement that can overtake us at any moment. So Christina, thank you very much for sharing some perspectives and giving us a lot to think about and giving us a little compassion for ourselves and others. So I appreciate that. And for our audience, if you have enjoyed this evening, I hope you will follow on our website, or if you get our voter newsletter, and watch for other programs that we are planning for the rest of 2025. Thank you very much, and have a great evening.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.